number of years ago, some friends and I were working together for a 24-hour call center that a friend of ours had started, a lawyer friend of ours had started in the Atlanta area, 24-hour call center for victims of trafficking. And it was kind of a rescue hotline. We worked with a few organizations to take some of the girls that we had received calls from to put them into safe places. There was a number of things that we started kind of branching out as. We were one of just the few organizations that were beginning this foray into this realm of counter-trafficking before it really became popular in the media. But one of the things that I remember clearly is that in 2013 we had gone as a team to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And if you could, I'm trying to keep it brief. There's a lot of details to the story, but more or less the idea was that if you can imagine kind of like if you've ever been in an atmosphere, in a place where you just feel heavy, weighed down, like something's just not right. The entire situation there was like that. You could just feel that something was going on. It was an atmosphere that was very oppressive. We were up late at night. We were visiting clubs and bars and lots of different places and seeing things and experiencing things that, it's, for lack of a better term, we just weren't created for. And after years of doing this, ending up in 2013 at the Super Bowl, I was kind of maybe at a point where I was a little overwhelmed. But at the same time, I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't just quit. And so I found out that the following year would have been what was going to be the World Cup in Brazil, 2014 World Cup. And I did a little bit of research and I realized that, wow, this is going to be a much worse situation than the situation in New Orleans here in the States. And so I decided, I'm not feeling great spiritually, but I just need to do this. This is something that I have some level of responsibility for, especially as a man, and knowing that one of the greater issues in Brazil was going to be the trafficking and exploitation of children. And so I set out to do it. I didn't know anybody. I wanted some help, and so I reached out to a number of different organizations, Adventist and non-Adventist, with very little luck. Managed to connect with a few friends who connected me to other groups in Brazil, and so I bought a ticket, a one-way ticket, planning on being there for at least half a year, if not more. And I went down to Brazil. And within a month of being there, all of the times that we were supposed to meet up with said individuals, a van would break down and then some other thing would happen, and then I could never get in contact with them. And all of a sudden the emails stopped and the phone calls stopped and the messaging stopped and everything stopped. And I had no idea what I was going to do. The projects that I had planned and we had discussed were not going to amount to anything. And so here I was wondering, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea. And so I guess out of sheer frustration, being pushed to a point where you just don't have any more choice to depend on anybody, maybe it was that point where I just said, okay, I'm going to depend on God 100% because there's nobody else around. I started walking and I saw somebody that looked depressed, and I said, okay, I don't speak Portuguese, and so maybe I can just pray for them. And that was kind of a first, because usually that's not my first response to things, but I did. And then I saw another person, I prayed for them, and before I realized it, I'd been walking through places that I was told I shouldn't have, and I'd spent 5 hours walking and praying. And I came to a conclusion that, okay, so this is what God wants me to do. He wants me to leave all of the other dependencies behind, and He wants me to just go with Him and do things that only the two of us can do together. In reality, what He can do and I just kind of joined him on it. And so that began the journey, and we'll find more about that next time.
Welcome, everyone, to Grounded, a journey of faith. Now, you're hearing a little bit of the testimony of Pastor Alex Niculaescu, a friend from Michigan. You'll find a little bit more of the amazing testimony, the things that happen in Brazil, where a spiritual warfare is taking place at a high pace, and things that are real, things that we talk about, but he is experiencing all this in Brazil, all by himself, and as you heard, he's praying. So Alex has worked, just to let you know, we're going to be in a little bit here with Alex. Alex has worked in various mission fields. As a matter of fact, he has done it for 13 years. He has basically worked along many other institutions. He has lived in East Africa in 2009. Since then, he has worked with various nonprofit and NGOs alongside various actually government and law enforcement agencies. So he has worked with them. He has partnered up with them. Alex lives in Michigan right now. He's a pastor of a district in Michigan. He has a wife, Chris, and a little girl. And we'll be talking today about an interesting topic. I know that perhaps you may think that this is an overdone topic, but I guarantee that we'll talk about some crazy stuff about the life of Joseph. So here we are. Please don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We have a short song, and we'll come back, dive into talk with Alex Niculaescu about Joseph.
Standing here in your presence, in a grace so relentless, I am won by perfect love, wrapped within the arms of heaven, in a peace that lasts forever, sinking deep in mercy. See, I'm wide awake, drawing close, stirred by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love. When I'm lost, you pursue me. Lift my head to see your glory, Lord of all. So beautiful. Here in you I find shelter, captivated by the splendor of your face. My secret place, I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love. Your love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my washing over me. Your face is all I see. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, hear my only cry to know you all alive. I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I'll breathe you in and lean into your love. Oh, your love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I see. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, hear my only cry to know you all my life. I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love.
Welcome back after that beautiful song. I just want to thank the young people for that beautiful song. So welcome back to our Grounded, a Journey of Faith. Pastor Alex, welcome to our show. It's good to have you. It's good to be able to see you and talk to you. It's been a while. I'm just wondering if I pronounced your last name correctly, Niculaescu.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. What is the origin of that last name? Where does it come from?
Romania.
Romania. So do you speak a little bit of Romanian?
Yeah, that was actually my first language.
So you speak Romanian, English, Portuguese, and what else?
And then I dabble at Spanish.
Spanish, yes. I met Pastor Alec at the Spanish church actually in Michigan. It was such a wonderful time. It was very good to get to meet you. And today I just want to. I know that as I said before, we kind of have overdone a little bit the character of Joseph, right? But I believe that there is so much to talk about, and especially as we talk about this journey of faith. You were talking there in your own testimony, your own journey of faith here in a different country, Brazil, without an agenda. You kind of, the Lord had put in your heart to go and work with people that were somewhat part of the sex industry, like they were a slave chained to kidnap and all that goes on, abuse in all these degrees there, and go and do something about it. But you didn't know exactly what to do. And here you are in your own journey of faith, praying with God. We'll hear a little bit more about it later. But now we're going to talk about Joseph, because Joseph has he had a crazy life, isn't it? Here you have Joseph. Basically, if anyone has heard the story of Joseph, my kids, they watch Joseph once in a while, and they love the story, right? We all know that Joseph was hated by his brothers, and he had this dream. He shared the dream with the brothers. It didn't end up well, and now he is sold as a slave. He ended up in Egypt in Potiphar's house, and from there, like things didn't seem to actually get well for him. I mean, he continued to go from bad to worse. And we find Joseph in Egypt. This is kind of the context of what we're going to talk about today. So, Pastor Alex, looking at the story of Joseph and the program that we have, Grounded, a Journey of Faith, how easy for a young man is to be in a place as Egypt all by himself? Or let's talk about perhaps the background of what I just mentioned.
Well, if I were to apply it to kind of, maybe my experience in Brazil or anybody from the United States going abroad or going to do some type of mission or whatnot, I would say that we could relate fairly well to the idea that Joseph was a bit of a spoiled brat. He came from, a life where he was doted on upon his father, and that probably blinded him to a number of things. And I think that can happen very well to us. We can be blinded to a lot of things because we have things pretty good, going pretty well for us by comparison to other people around. And so what happened with Joseph is that he seems to be completely ignorant of the fact that his brothers hated him, or at least he maybe had an idea, but kind of just, played it off. And here he is saying dreams and making things worse rather than better. He's fanning the flames of the fire rather than, showing humility or whatever. He's like, I'm all that, walking around with his coat. And it's just very, very common things that we can all be rather guilty of, when we're a little full of ourselves. We kind of don't take other people into account and how they may feel. But at the same time, I think envy is a real problem. Envy is something that if I put myself in the shoes of Joseph's brothers, to be honest with you, it just kind of stinks. It's kind of like, well, why him and why not us?
Well, I mean, he grew up in a very dysfunctional family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he had Jacob had 4 different wives.
Yeah.
And different children from all of them. So this is a dysfunctional home already. I mean, you have stepbrothers, right? Step siblings. So rivalry is something that is just kind of natural happen at the time because they were seeking attention. They were seeking attention from the father. Now we find out that the father was paying attention to Joseph because he loved Rachel. Rachel was
favorite wife,
the one that he had worked the 7 years initially to start, at his uncle's place there, Laban, right? So he had worked for her 7 years, and as a matter of fact, he worked for her 14 years because he was deceived, right? So now he liked this son more than the others, and there is a difference. He's making a huge difference. So this is not just Joseph here throwing into the fire, if you will, but also the father has contributed to the hatred or the envy that you are talking about, isn't it?
Yeah. I have to assume that there was more than just the favoritism, though. It can sound like I'm just trying to, dog on Joseph and say that, he was only a spoiled brat, but I'm sure there's no doubt that he had his good qualities. And I think one of those was probably some level of innocence, which may have also contributed to his ignorance of what his brothers thought of him. He was probably more pure than them, more innocent than them. In a sense, you could even say maybe even more righteous than them. And what comes to mind is the envy of Cain versus Abel, right? And we're told, why did he slay his brother? Why? Because his works were righteous, and Abel's works were righteous, and his own works were evil. And so I'm not going to say that the envy was all attributed by the father's love, though that definitely, I'm sure, contributed to it, no doubt. But I think that there may have been more, because we see many of those qualities now being, eventually going to be coming out when he's tried. And I think you have to have a good foundation. You don't just show up in a situation that's difficult with zero foundation and succeed. You have to have some good foundation. I think God in his mercy made sure that Joseph did have And whether that was from his father or whether that was from Isaac, who was still alive at this time, surprisingly, we don't really know, but we do. I do believe that he did have some good foundation that kind of gave him something to work with, or gave God something to work with.
Now it's interesting because when we look at the life of Joseph, and I want to kind of bring this quickly to home, right? We always think like the character of the Bible, somehow they had something that we don't have, but here we have someone that is, again, growing is growing in a place where he's growing with baggage. Probably he wanted to be accepted by his brothers. Maybe he felt some insecurities. Probably his situation, I don't know, this same situation, of being accepted and whatever, being left out, perhaps like move him to seek more refuge in his father, because he was the only one giving him the attention while the other ones were not, right? So, but he's growing in a completely dysfunctional place where he's already growing up with baggage. And on top of that, we have the awful circumstances that take place in chapter 37. If you are at home and you want to follow up, chapter 37 talks about that he had the dream. You're saying these dreams were kind of the wood in the fire, right? That didn't improve his circumstances at all, right? Didn't better his situation. And here he sees he sees himself now hated by all his brothers, and the situation gets so bad that your own siblings think to get rid of you by killing you. And this is where he's at. He goes to see his brothers. They plot to kill him. They wanted to kill him, but one of his brothers say, no, let's don't kill him. I believe that was Reuben.
Well, Reuben did try to come back and save him, because Reuben ended up sleeping with his father's concubine, and he lost his birthright as the firstborn. And so he's looking for an opportunity. I wouldn't say that it was 100% motivated out of kindness of his heart. He's looking to get in the good graces of his father by rescuing Joseph from this situation. But while his brothers are thinking of killing him, it's actually Judah that comes up with the idea of selling him, so that his blood wouldn't be on their hands. And whether that's just for lucre or whether he's looking to actually save his life, we're not really told. We can only assume. But we always forget that these are real people. There's always like multiple layers of thoughts and emotions and experiences that are intertwining into these stories that makes them so much more complex than just the way that we tell them as children's stories. I mean, these are real people that struggled with very real problems, and some of them progress and some of them regress, right? Like sometimes they fail multiple times and they never make it out. Sometimes they fail multiple times and they get somewhere. But I just kind of want us to take it into that, this context that these are real stories, and just because we're not given all the itty bitty details doesn't mean that we can't relate to them in a very real way.
And this is why I wanted to talk about Joseph, to be honest with you, is the fact that so many times, like, we see someone that is dealing with real emotions, real problems, real baggage in his life, right? He end up somewhere else, completely isolated from his family, against his own will. All these things that happen to him, they are completely against his own will. He doesn't want to be in that spot. Okay? Sure, he contributed in his innocence, naiveness, or whatever you want to call it, right? By perhaps digging deeper in the wound, right, of his brothers. But he's completely against his own will. All the stuff that has happened until this point where he ended up in Egypt has nothing to do with him choosing to be there. And sometimes this is what happened. Life happens to us, right? Things happen in our lives. We have baggage, things that happen against our will. We never choose to be involved in these kind of circumstances. Yet we use these circumstances as an excuse to move forward sometimes. or perhaps not an excuse. I don't want to sound that we make it as excuse, because baggage is real. Baggage is stuff that we actually deal with every day, and it's emotionally draining. It can consume a person's life. It can neutralize you from moving forward, from growing, even spiritually. But here we have a young guy, completely isolated from his family, completely against his will, all the stuff that has happened, yet his reaction is a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah. He reaches a point where he has a decision to make. And I think that this is important because, he would always report about his brothers to his dad, and he became this kind of little snitch that, dad trusted and whatnot. And whenever his brothers would give him, any type of flack over it, he could always run to the refuge of his dad. And now he doesn't have that. And I think that's vitally important, because we can have our little refuges, our little places of safety that we run to that aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves. It's great to have refuge in your parents. But at the end of the day, if that is where all of your purpose and belonging are focused, you can forget that you actually have another father, right? Another parent. And him being in isolation, him being separated from that dependency that, if this goes bad, I can just run back to dad. Well, no, you can't run back to dad anymore right now. And so you're going to need to run to another dad. And I think that's, in this situation, what God is trying to teach him. He's saying, listen, you can choose to be that spoiled brat, or you can run to me and allow me, right, to help you through this. It's not going to be easy. God never promises anything that's going to be easy. We don't even know what conversation he may have had with Joseph. Well, all we have is the assurance that God told him he was going to be with him, right? We are convinced that he knew that. He also received these dreams that showed that God had a plan for his future, right? How exactly that was going to play out, he had no idea, but he had a decision to make. Am I going to trust that God has a plan for my future? As we hear in Jeremiah, I know the thoughts that I have towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a hope and a future. Like, he could either, he could claim that those dreams that he had, that God has an idea and a plan of what my life should be, and I'm just going to trust him in that because I've got nowhere else to trust right now. Or I can just, throw a pity party and say, well, this is all because of my brothers and whatnot. And listen, we're told in the Bible that there are three enemies that we face in this life, right? The world, ourselves, and the devil, right? These are an interplay of these three enemies basically screw up our lives, right? The devil tries to undermine us. The world and the environment around us tries to undermine us. And then we ourselves undermine ourselves, right? We can totally be one of the sources of our own downfall. And you see this in what sets up Joseph's life, but now he's completely separated that. And you could say he has a new beginning where God is giving him an opportunity. Okay, all of those benefits and all of those deficits, all of those enemies that you had, all those things that were against you are gone. You have a new set of things that are against you that you don't know how to deal with yet. Will you allow me to teach you how to deal with them, so that when you deal with those situations that you didn't know how to deal with in the past, you'll actually have experience on how to deal with them? And we'll, jumping straight ahead, when he meets his brothers again, he doesn't deal with them in the same way that he's dealing with them now. Why? Because he's learned his lesson, because God had to separate him and say, listen, I can't teach you within this context. I'm going to have to teach you through another context. I'm going to give you some new challenges that are going to have to build you up so that you can come back and handle this like a big boy. Because right now you're just not able to. And I think Joseph decides that, okay, well, he's just going to trust. And that's a really hard thing to do. That's a really, really, really hard thing to do.
Now it's interesting, because in this decision to trust God, things do not get any better. I mean, he goes into Egypt. He gets bought by Potiphar, right? He finds, and God, I believe that God is giving him glimpses that he's still with him, that even though he's in the situation, he's not abandoned. I mean, okay, sure, you're a slave against your own will, you're there, but someone buys you, and now you find grace in the eyes of this guy, and suddenly he puts you in charge of his house.
Yes. Well, think about it. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Your brothers want to kill you, but one comes up, stands up and says, no, let's sell him. Life's spared. Okay, you take that as you want. but they were legitimately thinking of killing you. And then one of them says, okay, let's sell him. Who are they selling him to? Ishmaelites and Midianites. Who are Ishmaelites and Midianites? Next of kin. They know who Jacob is. They know who Isaac is, right? They come, they're all children of Abraham. They're descendants of Abraham, Ishmaelites.
Yes.
Right? And so they know who these guys are and who they're buying. And so you can, in a sense, maybe even God is showing them that, hey, your next of kin are saving you, in a sense, from your brothers. And maybe they even decided that they're going to sell him to a guy in Egypt that is a fairly decent guy. Maybe they've done trade there before. No doubt they've done trade there before. And so in these little ways, I mean, you can toss it aside if you want, or you can say, hey, this is providence. It could have been much worse. I could have been dead. I could have been sold to some people who didn't know me or didn't care about me. Yes, they sold me, but at the same time, I feel this sense of familiarity, and maybe they're trying to hook me up with some place that is less bad than some other options. And beyond that, I mean, Potiphar loves the guy. And you know, once again, jumping ahead, when he gets to the point where Potiphar's wife comes to him and basically asks him on multiple occasions, sleep with me, and he says no. And then, you know, at one point in time, nobody's in the house. He leaves his clothes. She accuses him. Potiphar gets angry. He should have been dead again, right? The natural result of assaulting Potiphar's wife, the captain of the guard, is execution. But he's put in prison. Why? So he sees that, hey, I'm doing good when I'm reporting my brothers to my father. I'm doing good when I'm serving Potiphar faithfully. I'm doing good when I'm rejecting his wife. I'm doing what is righteous, and yet what I'm being paid with is evil. But at the same time, even though I'm being paid with evil when I'm doing good, I can still see God's hand in preserving me where it could have been so much worse if he didn't have a protecting hand over me at all.
Wow.
If it was up to, you know, chance or whatever. I mean, there's too many strings in this story that just don't let you come to the conclusion that it was just happenstance that led to it.
And so many times I think that we fail to see the little strings in our lives, isn't it? I mean, we tend to focus on the baggage, the circumstances that come unwanted and welcome in our lives, and we seem to magnify those things in our lives sometimes, and those things put us down instead of trusting God in the process and seeing the strings that show that God is working, that God is manifesting himself, that God is still doing his will. Aside, you know, the negativity that goes on in our lives, we need to be reminded that we are in a great controversy, that evil is at play, you know, every second of our lives, every minute of our lives. So we do have these two powers that are colliding within our lives every single minute. But as I said, it's so easy sometimes to focus on the things that are bad. And you know what? I make this mistake sometimes too, where I'm focusing on all the bad things that are happening, and I fail, and I kind of start forgetting about all the strings that led me to the place where I am.
I want you to think of a very simple example. Inside a cave, if you have a flood, it washes things away. But if you have a trickle, it actually builds stalagmites, right? So you get deposits from slow drops of mineral-rich water, and they build and they build and they build over hundreds and hundreds of years. But you have a flood, and it begins washing things away. And this is the way that I like to relate to things in our life. You have a big event, right, like a flood in your life, right, something that is disastrous, and you focus on that, but it was actually the hundreds of smaller things that happened over a long period of time that built you up. Can't be crashing down because of this one big event, right? When in reality, it's the small string of consistent presence of God in your life through all these little tokens of his grace and love for you, right? That the fact that you're still here, right? That built you up. So there's no reason to crumble, right? And it's just very easy to look at the big, you know, momentary things as opposed to the small, consistent buildup of things, because we don't see that. We don't see the growth, right?
Now,
But that's also where faith has to come in, because it's not as perceptible. It isn't. You see the results, but you don't see the process all the time.
now this is how God is building us, and I love what you're saying. Like it's the small little drops that are building you throughout life, and it's easy to focus on just the momentary things that perhaps are going wrong and feel discouraged. But here we have now this kid in Egypt all by himself, with, you can say, here you have a foreigner, not just a foreigner but a slave, not just a slave, but now he has a criminal record, a sexual offender, if you want to put it that way. Now, how would that look in your resume, Pastor Alex? You know, you're a foreigner, a slave, and now you're a sexual offender. You have it on your record. I mean,
well, even if those were false accusations, like they were in Joseph's case, just having them on paper doesn't do you any credit. You can say, well, I haven't done that, and people will still be, well, I'm sorry, you know, the record shows. It's not helping you in your job search, that's for sure.
No, but it's interesting because with this resume, now you see okay, we know through the story, right? Because we know the background and we know everything that has happened in the life of Joseph through this story, through the narrative. We know that he's innocent, and we know that all the things that he has done have been righteous. We don't hear anything bad about Joseph. As far as I'm not aware that, I mean, aside from, you know, perhaps being this little brat kind of thing, you know, when he was young, right? Like, but we don't hear anything. The narrative doesn't speak of anything bad that he did. As a matter of fact, it's because of his righteousness that he is in the place he is, in jail in this moment, right?
The narrative doesn't give us details, and I think when we look at Jewish writings, a lot of times they want you to read between the lines. The way that Hebrew writings are written is for you to search what is there, to dig out what is there, not to just peruse and, oh, okay, well, that's what it said, so that must be what it is. No. It says things so that you look for the things it hasn't said. And that's kind of the goal that you dig out of it, because the moment you find that truth is the moment that you discover something and you remember it. Right? I mean, how many times have you read the story and you think you know it, but it's only when you actually dig and you find something that you really remember it. Right? Because all of a sudden there's something that stands out. And that being said, you know, there's tons of things that will allude to the fact that things weren't always peachy in his life. The main thing that it's telling you is that he was faithful. But you can see that there's moments where he gets frustrated. Right? He's doing what is right. He ends up in prison. It doesn't say very much, right, at that moment. But when you see that these two guys, the chief baker and the cupbearer, they come, he complains to them. He says, I was brought out of my land. I was a slave. I was in Potiphar's house. He gives them the whole story, you know, and I'm pretty sure that he talks about, hey, I'm innocent, right? I was wrongfully accused. I'm here, right? This is not fair. But remember me, right? Remember me, recommend me when you go back to Pharaoh. And what happens? He gets forgotten for 2 whole years. I mean, my assumption is that it wasn't just, oh, well, if God decided so, then it must be okay. Like, I'm sure he struggled. I'm sure, like, yes, the result is that he chose to have faith, but I'm not going to have the imagination that it was easy. I'm not going to assume that, you know, he never complained, that he just accepted. No, he did accept a lot, but it's not like he didn't have to struggle with certain feelings or emotions that were negative. I'm sure that he did, and he had to come to terms with those things. But at the end of it, he had to just say, okay, I don't understand why things are happening. I'm not necessarily happy with my situation, but I do see how you have preserved me this entire time, and I'm going to continue to be faithful because I trust, right? All the things that have happened, good and bad, I can see that something's going on, that you're putting things together. I don't know what the future holds. I'm just going to continue to be faithful. And this is obviously what the story wants you to take out of it, this idea of just continued faithfulness. But we remove the humanity from it. We forget that this guy is not some saint. This is some guy with thoughts and struggles, and he's probably wanted to shake his fist multiple times. He's probably wrestled with God in the same way that his father did, and simultaneously lost and won, right? Because whenever you fight with God, you simultaneously lose, but you win. He's probably had those moments. There's not a doubt in my mind that he's had those moments. You can't have that type of trust and victory without some level of complete giving of yourself.
Yeah,
and you don't just give yourself like, oh yeah, okay, Lord, I'm going to give you myself. No, you've got to be beaten down.
Yeah, probably he had many of those moments. I mean,
Sure.
when you're doing right and then everything seems to work against you. I mean,
Well,
who
every
hasn't
time you do right, it gets worse, not better.
who hasn't had those moments where you're doing things right and things go completely sour for you, and here you are complaining, hey Lord, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Why are you repaying me this way, right? And we tend to blame God for what is happening.
But it's even worse when we know that they know that they're wrong and that we're right. Right? I mean, like imagine Joseph knows that he's innocent. The woman knows that he's innocent. I'm sure the people knew that she had been trying this for a long time. The other servants in the house, I'm sure there were, evidence that she was interested in him, maybe some slight flirtation or thing. This is a process because she tried over a long period of time, it tells us. And then finally, all the servants are on the house. Isn't that convenient, right? Nobody's in the house that day. That's ultra convenient. Sounds like a setup to me. And so you can see that even the way that Potiphar responds by not killing him, putting him in a prison that he himself is in charge of, right? And eventually he gets, to be, the top person in the prison. People know that he's honest. People know that he's faithful. And yet, at the same time, he's being treated badly for it. Like, what's the point if I know that I'm doing what's right, and you know that I'm doing what's right, and everybody knows that I'm doing what's right, but you're still going to treat me as if I'm guilty, and I'm supposed to just, okay, yeah, that sounds great. That's fair. I'll just take that. No, you've got to have some serious, like, I don't know. I mean, like, and this is why I think he's a type of Christ, because he's willing to take severe injustices that people are very keenly aware of. But he's willing to take them because he realizes that this is part of the story that God has for him. This is what God is preparing for him for his future.
Now I do wanna. Our time is right now, but I do wanna spend some time on this one thought. And I mentioned he's a foreigner, slave, sexual offender in the eyes of people.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the background of the story, so we can stand back and see the whole picture. But people at the time, they would consider Joseph in jail as like, what do you do? Why are you here for? Oh, I'm innocent. Yeah, right. Like everybody here says the same thing. We're innocent, right? And probably people didn't believe that he didn't do that. Those who didn't know him. So here in the eyes of people, he has this crazy resume of who this person is, even though his life is showing something different, isn't it? But this is what is amazing to me. God can grab this one person that has this crazy background on the eyes of all those who don't know him, and he can turn the situation completely around and put him as the prime minister of Egypt.
Yeah.
Now, what excuse do we have?
Just a small little detail is God can sometimes use the people who have done us harm to also really help us, propel us forward. And in this sense, I'm sure that he was frustrated with Potiphar. But who was Potiphar? He was the captain of the king's guard. And here we have that the Pharaoh is having these dreams, and this unknown criminal guy is going to be brought before the Pharaoh. Not before he passes through who? The captain of the king's guard. So he has to go through Potiphar, I'm assuming right here. This is just a logical progression that before you show up to the king, you go through the king's guard or the captain of his guard, background check, all this kind of stuff. Is it safe to bring this person before him? And Potiphar, in my case, probably may have vouched for him. We don't know. We don't know. We're not told that. We can only assume that because he's part of the story, he's not only the person who hired him, but also the person who was most likely in charge of the prison, and at the same time, the person who you have to go through to get to Pharaoh. God used his how do I put this? Joseph's influence in the lives of these people to eventually bring them to a point where, you know what? It's finally being recognized. And not that it's about recognition, not that it's about, getting people to accept you, but God will eventually even work it out that your righteousness continuously shown, continuously shining forth, your faithfulness continuously shining forth will begin to be that trickle in their life that eventually brings them to a point where they can tell that God is working in your life. It's not always the big events. Oh, just give me a big event where I can stand up for somebody and save their life so that they'll trust me and whatever. No, it's the small little things consistently shown that we believe have the greatest amount of effect in people's life. And this is a big thing on top of all these little things that have been building up to this. And this is how I believe God works. He works by creating a tapestry which prepares us for the big thing that he wants us to deal with. He who is faithful in the little things will be faithful in the big things. If he can't trust us on a consistent basis, how is he going to trust us with being the prime minister of an entire nation and saving them from 7 years of famine? Right.
Now, to me, what is amazing is this process. We're talking about being grounded, a journey of faith. It is a journey. It is not It's not something that happened right then, in one moment. It's something that happens throughout life. And as we are being moved through life, as we trust God in this process, it's not always easy. In fact, it's very difficult at times. And as you were saying, we have the world, we have Satan, we have ourselves fighting against us. So we have all the odds to actually lose. But what is amazing is how God takes us into this journey where he's growing us, where trickle by trickle he's growing us and he's shaping us. And yes, it is hard, but the end product, I see a Joseph now when he encountered his brother, he says, these are the famous words, right? Now it's kind of like suddenly you see a Joseph that is mature, that he has realized the journey that he has gone through and how God worked every single story, every single detail in his life, where everyone meant it for bad, God meant it for good.
Yeah.
And this is our lives. If we trust God in that process, God continue to build you up. God continue to show you that he is with you, that you are not abandoned, and that he has a great plan for your life. Pastor Alex, I don't know if you wanna give us some closing remarks right now. Let me remind our viewers that if you have any questions of what we have discussed today, we will spend some time answering questions in Zoom. You can go on our webpage, Henderson Highway SDA. .ca. You can go there and ask questions. You can also go to a Slido code grounded, and you can put your questions there. We'll spend some time answering some of the questions, hard questions, whatever. We're talking about real life, the things that we go through, the things that we struggle. So that's why we wanna look at these characters from this point of view. Look at them from the real life. So, Pastor Alex, do you have any remarks of how can we wrap this up? What can we take from what we have talked today?
Well, I would say that probably the summary of it all is something that I see throughout the entire book of Genesis, and it's the idea of enough. Is God enough? Has he provided enough? is our relationship with him and the things that he has planned for us enough? We're always trying for something more. Are we always reaching for something that is without our grasp? Because if we do that, we don't trust him. And he, Joseph is a clear example where all of the things that he was dependent on were stripped away, and he had to come to a conclusion. Hey, am I okay where I'm at with God? Whatever the situation may bring, is God enough for me in whatever it might be? Can I trust him enough? Will I receive enough? Right? Am I enough? And the answer has to be yeah. Because if he's not enough for us, then we're going to always be looking for an answer that's not there. We're going to be looking to depend on something that may not be there, and we're going to face a lot of letdowns, and we're going to become jaded and depressed and victims, when we could say, you know what, Lord, whatever my lot may be, as long as you're with me, it suffices me. I'm that.
Beautiful, beautiful. He's enough. He is enough. He's enough for you. He's enough for me. He's enough for all of us. And as I said, this is a journey of faith. This is not easy, but in this process, we're learning to trust him. We're learning to live by faith. The just will live by faith, and is trusting God in this everyday, real life circumstances, things that, hey, they suck. They do. Life at times, it throws you some pretty ugly curveballs, and we all have to go through it. Joseph went through it. We go through it. You go through it. So I want to invite you to trust God in this journey of faith, so that he can bring these roots deep, so that you can be grounded. Remember, we have a section of questions and answer. You can go to our webpage, hendersonhighwaysda.ca. You can go there, scroll down, go to our youth and young adult part, join Zoom, and we'll ask whatever question you have. You can also go to a Slido code grounded. You can also, if you want to ask things anonymously, you can do that through via Slido. So you're welcome to ask your questions. So until the next one, may God bless you. Let's have a word of prayer to close the program. Pastor Alex, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for this awesome discussion. Things that I never thought from this story. It's very refreshing. So I thank you for this time. Let us have a word of prayer. Pastor Alex, will you pray for us, if you don't mind?
Father, Lord, it is an honor that we can call you Father. Lord, I pray that we would be able to learn in many ways, just like Joseph, through pretty real situations, that you are ultimately the one that we ought to depend on. Lord, you've placed good people in our life. You've placed bad people in our life. We oftentimes can be our own worst enemies. But Lord, whatever situation we find ourselves in, I pray, Lord, that through trusting in you, we wouldn't fear, because we will always have a way out.
Amen.
So Lord, I just pray that at this time, whatever anyone may be struggling with, or whatever difficulty somebody may be facing, that they may learn, oh Lord, that we may learn that you are enough, that you, oh Lord, have good thoughts towards us. You know the thoughts that you think towards us, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give us a hope in a future. Lord, I pray that your dream for us, your future for us, would be something that we're not afraid of, but something, oh Lord, that we would look forward to and allow you to work in and through us. Strengthen us, oh Lord, through the trials. Let us not avoid them, but let us go head on, face them head on, Lord, trusting in you each and every step of the way. We thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness and perseverance with us, even when we fail and give up sometimes. We ask, oh Lord, that you would continue to knock on the door of our hearts. Lead us, oh Lord, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Sabbath. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you here next Friday, 7 o'clock, for another time in Grounded, a journey of faith.